All right.
So are all these on YouTube right now?
All these are on YouTube.
Right.
Yep. So you go to the City of Winona's YouTube and
Oh, that's what I was trying to find. So I should have gone to YouTube. Okay.
and if you don't see it right away, you click on like see all, and then you can scroll down and they'll be there. So only the most recent ones come up, and show themselves to you, but yeah, works pretty slick. So,
Thanks.
all right. So as I mentioned, what Luke did is he went through and basically populated our goals and objectives template with a number of different things from the downtown strategic plan that we have already adopted. But what it really does is it kind of condenses it and gets it into a format that we're looking to and will be consistent with the rest of the plan. And so that helps us to be able to point to things and reference things a lot easier. So we can go through that for those that are joining us digitally here. But one of the things I wanted to talk about first is this increased housing choice in the downtown core area. And I'm sure you've talked about how we can have more people living in downtown in addition to working in downtown. We've done a pretty good job of that, I think, since the 1980s when we did some code changes to allow some of the more vacant buildings to have the apartments upstairs, essentially. So the apartments cash flow the buildings so that the commercial isn't as important for the landlords. One thing we did with our Unified Development Code, which is our zoning code, is we created a new zoning district called Mixed Use Downtown Core. And we updated our zoning code in 2017, and our zoning code, and I'm not sure how much Luke has delved into this, but it's basically our nuts and bolts. It's our tool for regulating land use in the city of Winona. So the comp plan guides the zoning code, and basically anything that you come up with as part of this committee that gives Luke and I direction to go and change the actual city code or the actual rules and regulations that govern what can and can't happen on pieces of land within the city. So it's extremely helpful, the process that all of you are participating in right now, not only to us, but you're benefiting the whole community as well. So definitely your time here is very much appreciated. So one thing we did in 2017, we created this new mixed use downtown core zoning district. And we had 7 different zoning districts in downtown. So it was super confusing. Like, what can you do here? What can you do there? Consolidated it all down to one. One thing we tried to do though, is to encourage mixed use. And so we wanted to have a mix of apartments with commercial on the first floor. What happened though, is after we adopted that thought, the actual zone got applied to a lot greater area than we thought it would. So now all of a sudden, instead of just the core area of downtown, so you think of 2nd Street, think of 3rd Street, that mixed use downtown core applies on 4th Street, areas on 5th Street, all the way out to Huff, and then east of downtown as well.
Were you asking how that happened?
Yeah.
So the way that happened is basically it went on recommendations of the comp plan, but then as we kind of negotiated through the approvals process, that zoning district basically expanded further and further. And so what happened is that's been a good thing because it allows a lot more flexibility in uses. But the one thing that has become an issue is people want to put a straight apartment building in on 4th Street or on 5th Street, areas that are surrounding the traditional retail core of Winona, but they have to have a minimum of 50% of the first floor dedicated to non-residential use. And that's been kind of a hang-up that people have brought up in the past number of years related to redevelopment, especially just related to the need and demand for commercial or non-residential space.
Okay, so how did it actually expand? Like, how did that just?
So when we applied it, we recommended it for a smaller area than what it was
Right.
eventually approved for. So the boundary basically expanded.
So,
By city council?
Yeah, by city
okay.
council, planning
Okay.
That's
commission.
what
and city
that's where
council.
I'm trying to get.
Yep,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. And I think some of it had to do with, there was a big discussion about the YMCA going at that point in time.
Yeah.
And the district got applied because in this district, another important component is that gas stations are not permitted. So you can't have gas stations in the core area of downtown, and people didn't want to see a gas station where the Y was, because at one point Quick Trip was proposed to go in there, and that was,
So BP was the exception, was grandfather.
yeah, exactly, BP and, yeah, BP's grandfather debt, essentially. So, in any case, I just wanted to show you that for increased housing choice in the downtown area, one thing that we're looking at doing, and I'll bring this up here now. So this downtown mixed use core area is everything that you see in kind of the darker teal. So goes out to the bridge here, then it expands over to Huff Street here and goes all the way down to the YMCA property, or the former YMCA property. And then you'll see it move, as we move to the east, you're on 3rd Street a little bit, but then it also expands down into 4th Street and 5th Street. So there's a lot of parcels in here that we think have redevelopment potential or potential to allow additional housing choice. That right now you have to have a commercial 1st floor unit. And so what we would do with
Kind of like
this.
what Main Square did.
Exactly, yep. So what we would do is we would focus on the traditional retail commercial areas of downtown, 2nd Street, 3rd Street, Johnson, Main, Center, Lafayette, and still have that. But then once you get outside of this core area, you could just do a straight apartment building in these general locations. So that's one thing, just talking through what we're looking at doing and what impact your recommendations would have. That's one thing where it would open things up and allow greater flexibility for more housing choice into the future. So. In addition to that,
Sorry, Carlos, is that map publicly available?
yep, that's on our citywinona.com and go to GIS and that is up there. Removing parking minimums for housing uses. Right now, we allow for mixed use, we allow no parking for up to 6 units. And then above 6 units, it's 1 space per unit. And what you can do though, is you can do covered bicycle parking for 4 spots. So essentially, if you have a building and you put covered bicycle parking in, you can put up to 10 units in and not have to provide a vehicular parking space, which I think is pretty good. So is there some additional room that we can provide some more flexibility in there? That's what we'd be looking at through this first part here.
Oh, to like increase that?
Potentially.
Okay.
Yeah. Then next we have communicate closely with downtown business owners and property owners. I think this is definitely something that now with so many new entrants into downtown is applicable more than ever. Improving accessibility in the downtown area, increase greenery and landscaping in downtown, incentivize historic building restoration and facade grants programs. Activating street space and public use spaces as venues for temporary events, retail and commercial. And I think that we've seen a lot of that, and that kind of flexibility open up, especially with COVID. People have started to realize that, hey, you know, we can use the streets on a temporary basis for more different things, and people are more comfortable with that now. Cleanliness and compliance, mix of destinations to make downtown one large destination. Improving connectivity to downtown. Vibrancy on weekends. Taking a look at our design standards for downtown. And then incorporating park improvements as well as incorporating placemaking and streetscaping into public infrastructure investments. And the last page is increasing communication with downtown property owners and business owners. So as you can see, Luke's been pretty busy here, kind of translating the strategic plan into a summary document. I know it may be a little bit difficult for those who are joining us via Zoom. But my first question would be just taking a brief look at this and just a brief discussion on this. And is there anything that you'd like to talk a little bit more about, or anything that when you see this, you're thinking we should add to it? Maybe we could start with this first page here, communicating with downtown business owners and property owners. Any other additions to that one?
The only thing that I just wrote down at first glance was, and maybe this isn't part of this document, but the how, like how will that really happen? Because I think what we talked about in a lot of our meetings was that there seems to be a lot of information out there about a lot of the things we're talking about, but people don't see it, or they don't get the information. And a lot of times it's because it's coming from different organizations, or maybe it's the city, or maybe it's the chamber, maybe it's a business group you're part of, or maybe it's the economic development group. I mean, there's so many different avenues to hear different pieces of information. So where does that responsibility lie, and how is it really communicated versus just, I mean, we all know it's there, but how are we gonna do it? And maybe that's totally different topic maybe, but I would like to see that in that particular, because that's the goal, like, how are we going to do it, or
I completely agree, and I would point out, because it's maybe at the start and the end, this is the same as the goal, the very last goal. And to me, I think this would be a great place to plug in that. I mean, I don't know if this is in any certain order, but that's one of the things we talked about right away in this group, and we talked about repeatedly. I think, right on the first page is a great place for increasing communication in general, with the general public as well.
Definitely. Well, and that's been something that I'm sure Luke has mentioned, but we've heard throughout every subcommittee. Just how important communication is when you have so many different entities competing for your attention nowadays.
So how would you say the city does it right now?
Right now, each individual department is responsible for its own communications. And so what we would look at doing is consolidating that into hopefully some type of new department that would handle city communications. So it wouldn't be up to the departments anymore. The departments would talk to the communication office person or persons, and that person or persons would be the point person to get the information out.
And so I don't know if I misinterpreted what you're saying, because I said general public. Did you mean specifically the business owners?
I mean, general public. as
Okay,
well.
cool.
Yes, I mean, just everybody, anybody,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
could be a mixture of both, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Got it. Thank you.
So I do have one area that I have questions on right away.
Sure.
And that's park space.
Yep.
So I believe that was towards the end, the second to last page. So Luke had mentioned some like greenway type parks. I think we had briefly kind of talked about little pocket parks.
Yep.
I'm curious, outside of Levy Park, what ideas there are already in progress for more greenery in downtown?
Yeah, so we have, as part of the downtown strategic plan, as part of our current plan, a lot of streetscaping recommendations for the streets, but individual lots that are private lots, that's kind of the next step.
Yeah.
So like if you're gonna do a pocket park, a lot of time it's private property.
Okay.
So how can you facilitate that on private property? Or are there grant programs available, for instance, for, small gardens or something like that in order to,
Sure.
green up alley type spaces?
Okay.
And so I think that's the next focus, and something that could be added here is incentives for private property owners to green up their spaces.
Because I've noticed, some businesses now like have, not flower pots and stuff, but they've actually dug up the curb or something and planted their own garden.
Yep.
Flower garden, not vegetable garden, like outside of Heart and Soul, and then there's one outside of, just around the corner from Blooming Grounds, that looks like they've got a little thing going on. So I've noticed that people are kind of starting that kind of.
And that's-
Is that what you're kind of referring to? Yeah.
Yeah, both in that section, like, so like right out front of your store, but also on areas that aren't the sidewalk either, so like behind the sidewalk. Where a private property would normally be.
And related, but I'm sure completely unrealistic, there's no possibility of the post office ever moving out of their location.
We would love to kick the post office out.
Ah!
I'm bitter about that move, and that was probably 30 years before I was here.
Probably 20 years before I was here. So,
I mean, before I was born, but I'm still angry about it.
yeah, no, I think that's near unanimous that the post office would be better off in its old building, which was amazing.
Where was
Um,
it?
I
Blooming
don't,
Grounds is, right?
what's that?
Where Blooming Grounds is?
Yeah, I actually, I don't know where it was located, but I do know that there was a phenomenal postal building that was demolished essentially and then replaced with what we have now in the location that we have
Okay,
now.
well, now I'm even more
Half
bitter.
the park was taken away and.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
in any case,
so I'm glad to know I'm not alone on that. at least.
yeah, no, you're not alone
Okay.
on that. Don't worry about that.
I walked
So,
through Central Park yesterday, just very unimpressed. Okay, sorry. That's a little side rant.
Yeah, no worries. Anything from anybody online, Caitlin or Rahel, about park improvements in downtown, more greenery?
I agree that it's needed. Um, Yeah, and just more connection between the different parks. Like if you are at Wyndham Park, it's not obvious where you could go to find another park in the nearby area.
That's a good point.
Definitely, and that's one thing that our Park and Recreation Subcommittee, I think, is gonna take, they're, one of the recommendations that they're gonna have, in addition to our Transportation Committee, is linking up green amenities in the city, so being able to get from one park to another park to another park. One thing that the Transportation Subcommittee, I think, will take a strong focus on is Huff Street, and Huff Street kind of being that north-south connector between the downtown area and the lakes, as well as moving even further to the Bluffland areas as well. So that can kind of be our central arterial for connecting a lot of our green infrastructure in the city.
Just provide shelter protections for transit stops. I noticed that those have improved. They have those kind of green,
The shelters, yeah, the new bus
yeah,
shelters.
they're very nice looking.
Yes, definitely, and that's been one thing that Monica has been working on with our transit program, is kind of a revamp, rebranding, and better mapping.
Yes.
So you know which lines are available when, where they can take you, that type of thing.
Mhm.
So
Is there, and I guess this is jumping into another subcommittee stuff, but is there any discussion about changing the bus routes?
yes,
Okay,
yep, and I will say too that we constantly take a look and evaluate those for changes and how they could potentially be rerouted or changed and altered to meet
You just
changing
did, it
needs.
feels like you just did that.
Yep.
Like, yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
yeah, so there's, and I did definitely note that, you know, when I moved here, these, what seemed like the kind of COVID bus routes that had been put in place, for me were absolutely ideal. I could pretty much get anywhere I wanted to from, you know, right outside my house.
Yep.
But now with the new routes, when I tried taking them when I needed to, it was very difficult to get anywhere that I needed.
Mm.
Interesting.
And that's just me and just, you know, my lifestyle and where I'm trying to go. And I know they're probably not targeted at me, but it was a very clear difference. Great and now terrible for me.
Okay.
And while we're on that, and speaking of the bus stops, the central bus stop lately has been even dirtier than normal.
Okay.
And I, you know, I don't know if there's any talk about, you know, I noticed something about cleanliness.
Yep.
That does seem a fairly important part, and I know there's, you know, give and take on that. It can't always be perfect, but
Yeah.
that's. Those two factors combined make it so that, before I was very excited for when I, could kind of start taking the bus again.
Yep.
And now I would never consider it.
Good to know. And especially, related to cleanliness and that is the hub. So, it should be a focus,
Mhm.
definitely.
And also why it would get messier,
Exactly.
when so understandable, but yes, it's a good point. It's also. Exactly the hub.
All right, and it might be easier for people who are here to kind of thumb through things. Mary, it looked like you were going to
Well-
say something.
Last time we talked about, lighting,
Yes.
and, at night.
Yep.
And I'm not sure maybe it's part of something that we wanted to just.
Yeah, it should. Get us something safety related, right?
Mhm. Um,
Yes, and I think that might come in under public safety, which is a section that Luke did not get to yet. But
Oh,
I
okay.
will note that, yes, and it would be. Yep. And it does come into play under that section. So between now and the next meeting, Luke is gonna take a look at the second half of the strategic plan. And that includes redevelopment, parking, public safety, which includes lighting, as well as the implementation and funding plan, which isn't something that's too applicable to us. But so those three things, redevelopment, parking, and public safety.
okay.
I do see for public safety, at least mentioning here of walking and bike patrols. On the last page, encourage community policing. Happy to see that. Is that police? Is that like community groups? Do you kind of know?
That's a good question. And so the idea with a lot of these would be for the committee to work on goals and objectives, and then it would be up to staff to work on the strategies
Okay.
and note the strategies.
Gotcha.
So I think that level of detail will come out once we talk about what our strategies to do that.
Okay. Cool.
So,
Very happy to see that though.
awesome.
Love that.
I also liked, because I know we talked about this under reevaluate design standards for downtown, the clear documentation for historic rehabilitation and investment in historic buildings. I think we were talking about, how do we attract more people to Winona in downtown, and we have all these beautiful, buildings, and we've done work to them, and what was here before that, and why is it important, and I mean, it's just not clear, so so I'm glad that it's in here, and I don't know. You guys will figure out the strategy of what it looks like, but I liked it, so.
Where's that part again?
Under reevaluate design standards for downtown.
So second to last page, mid-page.
Cool, okay.
And I
Oh,
just saw where, was it, read those, Reimagine just got a huge grant to do upper level rehab of upper level
Oh.
places in Main Street downtowns, and I think
Okay,
I've got some of that money.
awesome.
Yeah.
So talk to Emily about money. Cool.
I actually had wanted to mention before, when we were talking about that, there is the one historic kiosk on the corner of Third and Walnut. I believe.
Yep.
And I'd love to see more of those. That was something new. When my friends come to visit, when I'm walking on with people there, they enjoy looking at that.
Yep.
It's something
Oh,
I
that was
stop by.
where emergency.
We're merchants.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were required to do that. Because
Okay.
there were 3 historic buildings there
Yep.
that were taken down. And in exchange, they had to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not sure if I call it fair, but,
But yeah, those are good, yeah.
yeah, it's, so I'd love to see more of those.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
And I think those could be, easily incorporated into other things that we talked about, like communication, and placemaking.
Yeah.
And the placemaking is one that I've thought a little bit about because I didn't really have real background on that, or when we were having that discussion, any real ideas. But just taking a quick look at, some sort of similar towns I was looking at, Hastings recently, redid their small downtown area, with some pretty clear, like, transportation-based things like curb bump outs. But they did seem to have a pretty purposeful design language downtown that you can see even just, from a, satellite view.
Okay.
And so I thought that was just a point of information, interesting one to look at.
Well, let's take a quick look at it since we're talking about it.
Cool. And I came upon that when I was looking, we were talking about boat stocking downtown. And so then I started to look at the other towns along the river to see what they do, if they're on the main channel or not. Turns out most are, which kind of surprised me because I didn't think of that, but so I just kind of went up the river and came to Hastings and saw that. And on that part, most that are on the main channel but seem to have good boat docking seem to be recessed harbors.
Right, they're not, right, like,
But what'd you call them, the
Recessed harbors that
Yeah.
just, I think they maybe are more obvious. I mean, there is one in Winona. Winona Marina is on this side of the river. And it's, recessed the line out of the main channel. But it's not as obvious to say like wedding.
right, and it doesn't necessarily seem like it connects to downtown,
I
right?
agree.
Like you don't.
It's
You're
doable.
talking
It-
about
Yeah,
the recess one, what are you talking about?
Oh, so,
In-
and actually I can give a quick, if you can just quickly scroll over to Hastings Marina is just one example. So this is the main channel here, but and I guess, yeah, here, so.
yeah,
Yep, like this.
Oh, okay.
So where it's, sorry, my arm's getting in the way of the camera. It's in a bay that's out, connects right to the main
Tucked in
channel.
there.
Yep.
Mhm.
But exactly, it's out of the path. And so the Winona Marina is similar, but compared to a place like Red Wing, it's not as obvious and doesn't, like you said, also doesn't feel
It's
connected to.
Further downriver, yeah.
Yeah. It's walkable, but not easy, maybe. Not obvious, that's for sure.
So some things you were talking about, Ethan, in terms of,
Yeah, just, I mean, so you can already see, from the sky, the believe the bricking outline that they use for all the streets.
yep,
The bump outs.
Yep, and the bump outs, which are big. I mean, that's a much shorter crossing, obviously. Interesting too, here you can see that there are 4 different restaurants that have patios that take over parking spots. And I believe those are, and it seemed like some added greenery, but those are kind of the main things. There's a consistent visual theme. And so even from the sky, you can see
right, you're not.
this
right.
downtown.
And there's a cute little dog.
Yeah, right.
I do really love the bump out idea as, it's a pedestrian crossing. It's sometimes hard to see past those parked cars and it's hard for them to see you too, especially if it's not a 4-way stop. So I would love to see bump outs in downtown.
Totally agree. I didn't even think about the visual part. Just it's nice when it's so much shorter to cross. It's a very good point.
definitely.
Interesting too to note that on the left side of this bridge, they did just recently add a parking structure here.
Oh,
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 what's that?
Yep.
a charging station.
Yeah, but so that ramp is pretty new.
And it has the brick. Like.
It
right-
does,
right in
doesn't
front
it?
of
Yeah, so it's visually, if you zoom in on the,
Yep,
yeah, and the
so it
bump out,
connects it to
Yeah, to that side.
here.
right, so that you kind of know, and I mean,
Feel like you're in the same spot.
right,
Mhm.
And then I've heard of this place before, the Confluence. Is that what it is?
yeah, I couldn't figure that out either.
Yeah,
It looked like a jail.
it's only got 3 stars. Yes, no, definitely. And that's something that I'd love to see our comprehensive plan really push and hopefully at some point be able to accomplish in Winona, something similar to what they have in Hastings. I can even show you Mankato has something similar right in their downtown area. Right here on Front Street. And if we take our little person here
Mhm.
and we drop them right there. And we turn around here. So
Yeah.
you can see,
Mhm.
if we take a look at this,
Yeah.
that's what that street looked like in 2008.
Mhm.
What does that look like?
Mhm.
Winona,
Right.
right? Our downtown area, right? See, you got this huge street, yeah, and then you have some nice stuff, right? You got these, historic lights, and you got some good stuff going on over here, but then between 2008 and the current,
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and look what that does to the
Yeah.
atmosphere, to
Adding
the outdoor
trees,
seating,
it's
to the trees, to the, it just ramps it up 10 notches.
Benches.
Makes it more of a place you want to see versus drive through.
Right.
So that type of thing is something we definitely want to see. And we've already looked at our zoning code to help encourage buildings like this, because if you go back to 2008. You notice that building wasn't there.
Mhm.
And so what we've done is through our 2017 zoning code, we amended things to try and encourage new developments like this, where you have housing above retail. And I think we've done that a number of times. Now the next step is to take it to the public streetscape and actually create something like this.
Could Fastenal have ever put housing up in their brand new building downtown? Could
They
they
could
ever
have.
put housing?
Yep.
They could.
Yeah, but they just wanted to do the
Office
commercial
yeah.
portion of it. But I do see the potential for housing to go nearby that. That's huge, especially for people that are working there, of course.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, that's a great, thanks for bringing that up, Ethan, because I actually used this example in 2015 when we were talking about why are we redoing our zoning code. Part of that was to have more investment and more people living in downtown, because in addition to a brand new building, you get new tax base, you get new businesses, you get a brand new building, and hopefully what that helps to do is to provide the economic chutzpah to be able to get some of these public investments in here as well.
Sure.
So when will we start seeing some of the tax money from like the new Fastenal building, how, being generated and being able to use towards projects?
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question, and maybe that's something that we can add to this, is that as we see more development in the downtown area, continue to assess the impact that has on the taxes that are received and how that can go back into more improvements in the downtown.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd be really curious about that. And also just the impact on local businesses. I mean, I've tried to ask a couple of bars, do you have more people now? But I don't get a clear view yet.
Mhm.
And something I'm very curious about. Yeah.
And Rahel has her hand up. Go ahead, Rahel.
So, with the changes that Mankato has made in the last 10 years or so, I would like to know what are some of the safety implications that they also changed, because I see a lot of the aesthetic change and I think it's great and beautiful, but what other changes that have they done for their downtown area that adds to different safety features? Because I know that was something that we talked about at the last meeting. How do we make our downtown area feel safer, especially with Mankato also being a college town? I'd like to know what are some of the things that they've done.
Definitely. And one thing that helps when you have a setup, something like this, is that you have more people on the street. So you have more eyes on the street type of thing. So just, without lighting, without design, without that type of stuff, just having more people, a lot of times creates a better sense of safety.
That street, it just does, is their downtown kind of like ours, off the beaten path in terms of, the high, we're, down.
Off a major highway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so their main highway is up over, here's 169. And so their downtown is kind of on the other side of things.
So you have to be, yeah, intentional.
Yep,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you
Okay,
can
yeah.
feel that.
Mhm.
Okay,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
okay.
Mhm.
all right. Anything else from some of these sections that you have in front of you that you might want to talk about a little bit more? You know, one thing that I'll say that we've, from a downtown perspective, is allow the private investment to come, get more people here, more businesses. And then after that, that's when you can kind of make the case for some additional public improvements. And so it's making that case that I think is so important, because it's hard to create, for instance, something like a downtown tax district or something like that, if you know your downtown is struggling. But if your downtown's really strong and people wouldn't mind paying an additional tax, or say we were to put in some type of like parking meter system that could go into funding improvements for the downtown area, that's where, once it's successful, where we can take a look at implementing things like that. And that's kind of an approach that I think we've been trying to accomplish over the last 10 to 15 years here. And you can see within the last 5 years, some great strides that have occurred. But now it's time, in my mind, for that second step to occur and to say, hey, these great strides are being taken with the private land. Let's continue to have that, but how much additional vibrancy have we created? And, what impact does that have on the bottom line? And how can we use that to argue for more funding for public improvements in the downtown area? So nicer looking public parking lots, nicer looking streets like we just talked about, better connections between the parks that we have, that type of thing.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, that's actually something I think about a lot with sort of, some growing pains, when one thing has to grow before the other. I think of electric cars often as an example, like, do you have enough infrastructure out to charge it? But, do you have enough cars to make that infrastructure
Mhm.
worthwhile? One's gonna have to grow before the other.
Mhm.
And so I think about that with downtown as well. So I'm curious, yeah, what you'd see as kind of the next step. And I guess you kind of just said it.
Because consider green technology and improving parking lots, what's going on over kind of at Winona State with their new parking lot. Is that kind
Definitely.
of what we
Yes,
could eventually have?
yeah, so if the city ever does anything with a big roof in downtown, we want to put solar all over it. So, yeah,
And especially with parking lots, I like hearing about that. We were just
Yeah.
talking today, my friends and I about, it'd be nice to have more parking lots that are nicely designed.
Mhm.
Better
Yeah,
places to
I
walk.
said a couple weeks ago, the parking lot at the old Y, I love now what that they're adding landscaping, and it looks at that as now a condition.
exactly. So
That's-
prior to our new zoning code, that wasn't required,
Yeah.
but we required that now. And any new
Yes.
parking lot, you gotta have either green or a nice looking fence, like what the historical society has. So
Okay,
Who owns that land beyond the history center?
behind the history center,
Yeah,
the parking lot?
yeah.
History
the
Center.
history center.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And then right adjacent to that, the owners of Main Square own where the Winona County building used to be.
That's what I was wondering about.
Yeah,
Yes,
that
okay,
parking lot, yeah.
okay.
And they did a nice fence.
Yes, and eventually they want to put some type of office building there, but the parking lot, in my mind, I don't like how many parking lots happen in downtown, but in my mind, a parking lot is just a temporary holding, space
Mhm.
until something comes.
Right.
It's not the end all be all.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking about the large Fastenal lots. Do you have any insight onto if that's true or not? Like, are there kind of,
Well, I think the northerly one is being used pretty good. The southerly one, that's where the former Y was.
Yeah.
I think with the addition of the Minnesota Masterpiece Hall, that one will be used related for that project. But also the block to the north, there may be some redevelopment there. So maybe there would be some structured parking in that area.
Say they're getting
And-
blocked to the north.
Yeah,
I think maybe.
so I will, for those online and for us here too, so.
Where did you go for that?
citywinona.com
GIS.
and just look under maps. Or search for maps.
Yes,
Oh, right
okay,
there.
there you go, perfect, thank you, that
Yeah,
was the
I
part
saw
was
the click,
missing.
yeah.
Yep,
And so right here, this is where the Minnesota Masterpiece Hall would go. In addition, they're looking at utilizing some of these properties here in this area. But then this block here, the BP block, taking a look at maybe some redevelopment for that area.
Mm,
Right now, at least preliminarily, they're looking at parking for events that they have at the Masterpiece Hall to come from this lot, which is the southerly Fastenal lot. But if there's some redevelopment in this area, maybe some structured parking, the parking is closer to the theater. Could this come up for redevelopment? Definitely.
okay, cool.
But it's up to Fastenal because they own it. But I can see this, you know, just because of its location and its size, having a great redevelopment potential.
I know you said it's not used so much right now.
Exactly.
yeah, I've noticed that when I go by, it doesn't seem to be.
It'd be a great place for teaching your 4.5-year-old how to ride a bicycle, which is probably what I'm gonna be doing this weekend.
And what is the due date for the Masterpiece Hall in terms of completion?
Completion, I think it was 2 to 3 years from now. So. Yeah. What was it? I think 25.
Mm.
Which seems like a long ways away, but when you back it up and take a look at all the stuff that has to happen,
This was quick.
yeah, it's pretty quick. So,
I'm curious selfishly, because I live right in that block. How does the community find out about these proposed redevelopments and have a voice in those types of things?
when we get site plans and when we get public plans, essentially before anything happens, whoever is developing the area or whoever is proposing changes has to submit the plans to the city. And what we do is we let everybody know that, hey, we have these plans. So what we'll get eventually is a site plan for the Masterpiece Hall. And we'll let everybody know within 150 feet that we've received these plans. So whatever the boundaries of the project are, we'll basically draw a 150-foot buffer around that, grab all the properties and send you notice.
Carlos, we talked about that parking lot on Walnut and Second, down by Bay State, but just pretty much underused.
Yep. This one right here.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I just got thinking about that. I can't remember where we were going with it, but is that something that can be addressed somehow in terms of?
Yeah, definitely. Let me mark that down.
Would that fall under some of the park improvements too?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
maybe.
So that seems, yeah, like an important part of improving Levy Park.
And I think we've noted that a couple of times, just that this lot is underutilized. Is there a way to make it more accessible and easy for people to know that this is there? Is there a way for us to have a opening on Lafayette Street, that type of thing? But again, it's discussions with the railroad, and we've been more focused on how can we make this nice. I don't know if everybody remembers what it used to look like 10, 15 years ago. There was like basically a little asphalt path.
Yeah.
That kind of went across here, and it was like, you're lucky if you can get across there. And now this is 100% improvement. And then I don't know if you saw in today's post, looking at the
Main Street.
yeah, the not Main Square, but 60 Main project, and that's what would go in this general location here. So
Is there
there's a lot
headway
of
in that?
what's that?
Is there headway?
Definitely.
Okay,
Definitely. Yep. Take a look at the post today,
Yeah.
and then you can kind of see what the status of it is. But that'd be a great new project, a great new addition to our downtown.
Because the apartment piece is kind of new, isn't it? The 6-story apartment.
Yep, it would be an apartment building with a hotel and then commercial on the first floor, as well as some parking, structured parking incorporated into the overall development as well.
Is it rental or ownership?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think it's apartments, so
That's what- I thought it was apartment.
I thought I'd heard before it'd be condos.
it might be a mix of the two.
Okay.
Either way, it's additional housing.
Figuring out that might be where I live next, so.
So, and that again is gonna happen when, like, this year or next?
I would see applications coming in, like we talked about, Caitlin, for a developer, when something's gonna change, I would see an application coming into the city within the next year. It'll just be nice to have a project like that, because for years we've been talking about how, reconnecting with the riverfront and being able to have some additional housing more than the condo building that we have here. To capitalize on those river views and really reconnect downtown with the river.
What can be done, if anything, with the unused tracks there? I mean, how does it's being SF that owns that?
Sure, yep, and so as part of this larger project, what we've been doing is negotiating with the railroad to try and do something with this rail yard here. Because really the only track that is needed is this one, the northerly.
Yeah. it looks
So
like
one
the
has to
other-
stay, but the rest can go.
Yeah,
So what we'd really, years we've been working on this.
Okay.
Lucy in my department has been working on it for years.
Yeah, what's getting in the way? Just-
It's just railroads move very, very slow. And they only talk to you when they want to talk to you.
They're just very protective.
It's like pulling teeth.
okay.
Yeah. But progress has been made, and what we'd be looking to do as part of the 60 Main project, I'm not sure to what extent, but a portion of this rail area may become part of that project.
Okay.
Not part of the building, it probably won't be built upon, but maybe it's like a greenway type of thing.
Sure.
So, but yeah, in any case, make this look better than it looks right now. But still maintain that one line that we have that services Bay State, essentially. Yeah.
Makes sense.
We are starting to
Yeah,
run up on our hour here. We'd be looking at another meeting if we're meeting on the 10th here. How does the 24th at 3:30 work for people?
I don't think well, no, maybe I can.
That works for me.
Works for you, Caitlin? All right.
I thought it works for everybody else.
Works for me too.
Okay, thanks for help. Wonderful. All right, so in another 2 weeks here, we'll meet again, and I will work with Luke to get the comments that were made today incorporated into the draft that we have so far. And I would expect to see the second half of the strategic plan, the remaining chapters added on to this for our next meeting. But in the meantime, as was the case leading up to this meeting, if you have any changes, anything you want to see, let us know, or else just bring it to the meeting in 2 weeks. Cool. All right,
thank you.
thanks, everyone. Much appreciated again.
We're getting all of our thoughts on this paper.
Definitely.
Yeah, we have a visit on the board meeting in a couple weeks, and I'm supposed to report to them.
Oh, on this?
Yeah.
Cool.